One missile, $15 million. It travels at Mach 5, covers 1,700 miles in under 20 minutes, and hits with the force of 700 kilograms of TNT, from a position China didn't even know was in range. This week, the US Army asked to fire that missile in combat for the very first time. And the moment they did, China's entire Pacific strategy had a problem it can't solve. Here's the problem the Pentagon has been living with for 3 months. When the US and Israel launched joint strikes against Iran back in February, the goal was clear: destroy Iran's ballistic missile launch infrastructure before it could be used. And they succeeded. At first, but Iran's commanders aren't amateurs. Within weeks, they began relocating their remaining heavy missile launchers, moving them east, moving them deeper, beyond the reach of the US Army's precision strike missile, which tops out at around 310 miles, beyond the safe operating radius of carrier-based aircraft in a high-threat environment. Iran had drawn a line in the sand and dared the US to cross it. CENTCOM reviewed the targeting problem. The distances were real. The assets in theater couldn't cover them. So CENTCOM did something that had never happened in the entire history of American military power. They formally requested the deployment of a hypersonic missile to a combat theater, not as a threat, not as a deterrent, as a weapon ready to fire. The system they requested, the Long-Range Hypersonic Weapon, known as Dark Eagle. And this is where the story stops being about Iran. Because the moment Dark Eagle loaded onto a transport aircraft, every military planner in Beijing started doing math. Very uncomfortable math. For 6 years, China's military doctrine in the Pacific has rested on a single assumption. America needs time. Time to move carriers into position. Time to get strike aircraft close enough. Time to coordinate with allies. And during that window, China believed it owned the first move advantage. The DF-17 was built specifically to exploit that window. The DF-17 carries a maneuvering hypersonic glide vehicle. China paraded it through Tiananmen Square in 2019, like the war was already won. The doctrine behind it is straightforward. Sink a carrier, deny America's air power, own the Western Pacific, and Taiwan doesn't get reinforced. That entire doctrine assumed one thing above all else. America's long-range strike capability still required getting close. Dark Eagle just broke that assumption. The LRHW has a confirmed range of 1,700 to 2,200 miles. It travels at Mach 5, 5 times the speed of sound. Launch to impact, 15 to 20 minutes. It maneuvers during the glide phase, making it extraordinarily difficult for any existing defense system to track in time. And as of April 7th, 2026, it is no longer under theater command. It's under STRATCOM, the same command authority that controls America's nuclear arsenal. That elevation isn't bureaucratic housekeeping. That is a strategic declaration. Only the President of the United States decides when Dark Eagle fires, and he now has a conventional precision weapon that hits with the force of 700 kilograms of TNT from 2,000 miles away in under 20 minutes. Before we break down what this means for China's entire Pacific targeting doctrine, and why the DF-17 may now be the most expensive answer to a question nobody is asking anymore, drop a comment right now. Do you think Dark Eagle actually fires against Iran, or is this pure deterrence theater? I want to see what this audience thinks. Let's break down what this weapon actually does. Not by the spec sheet, but by what it does to the enemy. Dark Eagle is a boost glide system. A 2-stage solid fuel booster launches the common hypersonic glide body into the upper atmosphere. The booster drops away. The glide body skims along the atmospheric boundary, maneuvering continuously as it descends. Here's why that changes everything. Ballistic missiles follow a predictable arc. Radars detect the launch, calculate the trajectory, and cue an interceptor. The entire physics of missile defense is solving a math problem. And math problems have answers. Dark Eagle doesn't follow an arc, it maneuvers. The math problem changes constantly in real time at Mach 5. No existing Chinese air defense system, not the HQ-9, not the S-400 variants in their inventory, is designed to solve that. And here is the detection problem that makes it worse. Standard radar systems are optimized to track objects following predictable ballistic curves at high altitude. The common hypersonic glide body doesn't climb to that altitude. It stays low, skimming the atmospheric boundary where radar coverage is weakest, and tracking windows are shortest. By the time a defense system gets a clean return on Dark Eagle's signature, it has already closed the distance. There is no interception window, there is only impact. Now here's the asymmetric math that should concern Beijing. Each Dark Eagle costs approximately $15 million. The warhead is under 14 kilograms of actual explosive. But at Mach 5, kinetic energy is physics. The impact delivers 700 kilograms of TNT equivalent, concentrated into a deep penetrating strike on a small, precise area. That ratio is the key. 14 kilograms of material, 700 kilograms of destruction. The difference is entirely velocity, and it is a difference no armor, no bunker depth, and no point defense system currently in the PLE inventory is rated to absorb. The physics don't negotiate. A $15 million missile, destroying a $500 million air defense radar complex, before the complex even registers the launch. For context, until Dark Eagle, America's best Army ground-launched option was the Precision Strike Missile, a capable weapon that tops out at 310 miles. Dark Eagle's confirmed range is 1,700 to 2,200 miles. That is not an upgrade, that is a different category of weapon entirely. The production bottleneck is real. The US is currently producing 1 to 2 Dark Eagle missiles per month. This is not a weapon for mass strikes, it is a weapon for the most critical targets on any battlefield. Command centers, radar nodes, missile launch sites. The exact targets that protect China's carrier killer capability. And there is now a weapon in theater that can reach those targets from beyond any Chinese defensive perimeter. Here is the question every general in the People's Liberation Army is sitting with tonight. If the US can now strike from 2,000 miles away, from positions the DF-17 cannot reach, what exactly is the DF-17 for? China built the DF-17 to create what strategists call an anti-access area denial bubble, a kill zone around Taiwan and the South China Sea where US surface ships could not survive long enough to matter. The logic was ironclad. Sink the carriers, ground the air power, and Taiwan's window for outside reinforcement closes permanently. That kill zone was designed around a specific geography of American power. It assumed US strike capability was concentrated on carriers operating within 500 miles. It assumed that standoff distance topped out around 300 miles. It assumed America needed proximity to be lethal. Dark Eagle adds 1,400 miles of additional standoff. Overnight. That changes the geometry of every Pacific conflict scenario in the wargaming books. US Army multi-domain task forces can now position hypersonic batteries in Japan, in the Philippines, in Guam, and hold targets across the entire Chinese coastline at risk, without a single carrier entering the South China Sea. Without triggering the DF-17's targeting envelope at all, the DF-17's entire strategic reason for existence was to make that impossible. China's response is now a race against the production clock, and they know it. Right now, the US has 8 Dark Eagle missiles per operational battery, building at 1 to 2 per month. Beijing strategists have those numbers, and every month that passes, the window in which they hold any meaningful hypersonic advantage over the United States closes a little further. What played out in the Middle East this week is not just about Iran, it is a live demonstration. It is the Pentagon saying, to Beijing, to every Pacific military command watching satellite feeds, that America's long-range conventional strike capability has crossed into a new threshold, and the Dark Eagle hasn't even fired in anger yet. When it does, and the targeting calculus now says it will, it won't just be a missile launch, it will be the moment the hypersonic gap closes permanently, and the weapons China spent a decade and billions of dollars building to exploit that gap become a very expensive answer to a question nobody is asking anymore. If you want to understand exactly what China's countermove looks like, and why the PLA is now accelerating a hypersonic program that hasn't been discussed publicly, that's coming next. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it.